Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephanie Simmons. Thank you for joining us this morning here on KHOU 11+. January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month. For the next hour, we will be covering From Awareness to Action, Stories and Solutions to End Human Trafficking. We have some incredible people working in our community on this issue here with us this morning. Joining us now is Kathy Griffin, the Director of Human Trafficking Victim Services with the Harris County Constable's Office in Precinct 1. Heather Martinez, a trafficking survivor and intake manager for Crosswalk Center, which is an organization working to help people re-enter into society after prison. And Joe Madison from Demand Disruption, which is an organization that works to fight the demand for trafficking by eliminating the motivation for buyers. And Michelle Sachs, the Executive Director of Street Grace Texas, an organization that helps prevent the exploitation of children. Thank you all for being with us. This is a very important conversation we're having this morning. Let's get right into it. Houston said to be one of the worst cities for human trafficking. What can attribute to that? Kathy, please answer that for us.
Well, from a few decades, they have contributed that because we're on the I-10 corridor and we're open, no zoning. We have so much land and space, and we have the sexually oriented businesses that just about can pop up anywhere. But I'm seeing the majority of the stuff that I'm working with is coming from social media, out of the strip clubs, and now the massage parlors and that type of thing.
In 2024 into 2025, are you seeing an uptick of online solicitation that leads into human trafficking?
Yeah, I would take that back even further. 24, 25, I'd go much earlier. In fact, I'd go back to COVID, pre-COVID, and then when everything was supposed to slow down and be quiet and we had essential businesses during COVID, we saw an incredible, almost an exponential growth in illicit massage businesses, these places that are supposed to be closed. Yeah. We track those. As an organization, we know there are nearly 1,400 of them in the state of Texas, and we research each one of those. And I was just in West Texas last week helping them put a strategy together to how to shut down the nearly 50 between Midland and Odessa. And so I bring that up because we have to think about all the factors that Kathy mentioned. We do have male-dominated industry. We do have all these factors that lead toward it being an environment where trafficking can happen and sexually oriented businesses are. But now we have to think about what's that delivery mechanism look like. And social media, adult websites. What a lot of people don't realize is you go on an adult website, you're going to see your video, you're going to see a pop-up for a webcam because they want to take it from you and a video to you and a person, even though you're still not in the room with that person. You've got justification to act out. And then there's always going to be that button you can click on that says meet local ladies, and that will take you to an escort site. And so you go from a video through this sales cycle to an escort site. And then you show up in hotels, massage parlors. It's a flow that a lot of people don't realize that is happening every day in the thousands in terms of solicitation in our city.
So that's for buyers, but also for the people, the individuals.
The workers.
Being trafficked.
Yes.
So talk to us about how families can keep their kids safe, because parents really have to worry about this and track their social media and sites that they're visiting, and maybe even people who they're talking with on the internet.
We have a problem with families.
Yeah, and it's difficult because I think as parents, they're not always as tech savvy as our kids, right? And they don't exactly know what to look for. And these traffickers, or even just those that are recruiting, could be kids that are at school. It could be, people that are around them. So I think there's this big misconception that it's happening in other parts of town, or that it's happening in other countries. But really for parents, it's really difficult because a lot of these conversations are happening in like private messaging, and really any app now has messaging capabilities. Yeah, sure. Like some that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Like I think we just think Snapchat, or we think Instagram.
That's what I'm talking about.
But so it's not just like text messages anymore. So it's not the easiest thing for parents. So I think just having those conversations early on You know, we always say like a confident child's a protected child, and
yeah, and these people are very smart and they're
Yes.
manipulative, and these poor children are so trusting with adults. They think that all adults are like their mom and dad, and it's so sad to see what happens. So we're going to talk about resources at the end of this conversation about where parents can go to get help and things like that.
Well, there's also one other thing where children now are being able to get paid by just conversing with other people that even they might not be looking at, and they say, no, this isn't sexual, I'm fully clothed, I'm just talking to people and I'm getting these checks. But the AI is taking over with that, undressing these individuals. They're starting to make doing stings, and some of these people are getting arrested for first-time prostitution. They're like, but I didn't do anything. So they don't even know that they're getting drawn into some
like
stuff.
a deep fake.
Yes.
Okay, and then Heather, we haven't heard from you yet. If you wouldn't mind, you know firsthand about situations like this, incredibly terrifying. Can you talk a little bit about, if you feel comfortable, your experience and what you're doing now to help people?
Yes, ma'am. So my story started from falling in love. I met a man that I thought was my first love. I thought was who I was going to be with for the rest of my life. And over the course of the next 17 years, he sold me to other individuals. He put me in rooms with people, and it was either you're going to do this or I'm going to put my hands on you and you're still going to do this. And I was young, I was in love, I thought that this was my forever, and so I just thought that he loved me, and if he loved me, he would do that. And so it continued on to that until I prayed my way into prison. I was one of those that I would do anything for anybody, and found myself in prison the second time, which landed me into Kathy's RO Way to Freedom program. And it was in there that I understood what trafficking really was, and realized that this whole time where I was in love with somebody and thought that I was having a family, had children with, that I was actually being trafficked. And so now I spend my life, because not everybody is just snatched up off the street or found in a game or through a text message. It's people who are truly thinking that I found the one, and not understanding what it looks like, and being trafficked for many, many years to the point that they maybe can't get out. And so being able to tell my story and just share where I came from and how I walked through that and where I am now and the healing that's happened can help other women maybe escape from where they're at.
And for parents especially listening to this, what was the age difference between yourself and the man who was manipulating you, and how over the course of what amount of time?
So we were just a year and a half apart. He was somebody that I found when I moved from a small country town to Austin. He worked where I worked at, and now that I look back on it, I'm not sure what his history was, but I feel like he was grooming me, getting me ready for that. And then it happened for 17 years. It was very much on and off. He wouldn't release me to go to do things. I couldn't even hang out with my family. He would keep me hostage in my apartment. I would have to account for every second of every day, and if I couldn't account for it, then there were consequences to be had.
Okay, so you were talking about isolation.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
what are the other warning signs people need to look out for if they could possibly be being trafficked?
I was 14, and my first was 28, and this person convinced me that they were going to make me into a woman, and I'd never have to worry about anything ever again in life. And so thank God they didn't have social media back in my day, back in the Ice Age. But parents need to understand one thing. If you think, oh, that won't ever happen to my child's in choir, my child's in student council, my child's on the honor society, those are the main ones that are going to be targeted.
Why?
Because the parents figure, oh, I've raised them right, and they're not going to do this, and they won't curse, and they won't use drugs, and the cartels and drug traffickers and sex traffickers have now even implanted individuals into this society so that they can recruit, be groomed. Oh my God, there are millions of ways that it's done now from what we knew when it happened back in the
And
Ice Age.
anytime there's a process, as you're talking, anybody that wants to manipulate, they look for the common denominator. And the common denominator in our culture is belonging. Like, we've all become such individuals, and we all have smartphones, we've got identities, and we've got our profile, but the belonging, the connection that's missing, we have a point of reference because we're old enough to know what life is like before the internet, right? Back in the Stone Ages.
Me too, though. Don't look at me like I'm in here.
You said that, not me.
I
You don't
know.
look like it.
The good old years.
But just knowing that, like what Michelle was saying earlier, we live in the greatest technology gap in history. You know, it took us 150 years to go from Morse code to a beeper. And it took us about 20 years to go from a beeper, flip phone, bag phone to a smartphone. We weren't ready for it. And we're still learning as adults, and we're still falling into traps as adults. Can you imagine a kid who has not had any other point of reference? So I think what it comes down to, a lot of what we're saying is, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but we tell people in our workshop, we do a workshop for parents called Defend Home. And the goal is, don't think about building a bigger wall to keep the bad things out.
Right.
Think about being a better doorman. Who do you let in? What's your worth? What's your value? And the only way to do that is to really have a consistent conversation. Have these things where I love you, you have a smartphone, and there's just too much going on for me not to be involved in what you are. So if you're on social media, I need to be a friend on social media. These are not things that should be negotiables. It can be hard to have that conversation. Of course, kids can have other accounts that you don't know about. But again, it goes back to creating that worth within your own child, making sure that you've got an open conversation and communication, so when the big things hit, it's not a one-off. It's mom already understands, dad already understands. We've had these conversations because that's what it's going to take. And we also have to condition and teach them when they have kids, because the technology is just going to keep moving.
How young are we talking with kids?
So young.
Yeah.
So young, because look, we've even seen it on Roblox, right?
Yes.
So you were asking like signs to look for. So sometimes, like, you know, again, I've been around for a
The
while
video
too.
game?
Yeah, the video game.
That is very scary. Let me interrupt you for just a second to set this up even more, because as I'm thinking as a mother of an 8-year-old boy, he does not have social media. He does not have a phone. Many parents out there can relate to this, but he does play video games, and they are playing against, innocently enough, people all over the world, and that triggered something. So can you get into that?
So absolutely. So I remember a case where I can't remember if he was 6 or 8, because now you're saying 8, so I have 8 in my head. But
I heard 6.
Okay, you think it was
She's
6?
got 8-year-old.
So he, so there was somebody that was grooming him through the game, and what he was doing was he was asking for naked pictures. This little kid didn't care, right? Because what the perpetrator was doing was putting money, like giving him Robux.
Buying the car.
Oh my
So
goodness.
putting the money in the account. So like, parent had no idea, right? And the parents are going to give you money for, I'm sure your kid's always wanting money for Robux, right?
Yes,
And so back, you know, again, before, sometimes we would say, like, you know, if there's any money that, you know, maybe you don't know where like the money came from, but now it's harder to find because they're paying them through Venmo or Cash App. So everything's being done electronically. So we don't always see it. But to Joe's credit, right, like, you have to talk to these kids from birth, right? Like, when we talk about boundaries, because these conversations should not just be a one and done. Like, they need to start evolving, because if you're having these honest conversations, then you're a little bit better off. And I have kids now, you know, my youngest just went off to college, but the best time I always found to talk to my kids was in the car, because they're hostage and they can't get out, and also because it's less awkward than sitting them down and saying, okay,
We're having
so
a family
tonight
meeting.
we're going to talk about pornography, right?
Exactly.
They don't want to talk about
And
it.
so I always just kind of leverage what was happening either in the news, or because I am in schools, like just talking about maybe something I saw. So instead of saying, are you doing X, Y, and Z, I'd be like, hey, you know what, like, this happened, or I heard this happen, like, have you heard this going on at your school or with your friends? But just opening up that conversation and being that safe space for them, because they need a trusted adult. And then be real with the fact that sometimes they may not feel comfortable talking to you, so letting them know it's okay if they don't, but they need to talk to an adult, and maybe just identify some people. But
Can I just add to that? Because that's
absolutely.
so crucial. One of the things that we teach in our workshop is something we call the empathy story model. The whole point of that is for parents to get good at being able to lead with empathy with their kid. Like, think about that dynamic. It's like there was no empathy when I was growing up. Like, do your homework. No? Okay, you're not doing anything. Or you might get a smack across the head, something like that. But when we are able to tell a story to our kid that has some empathy, something like we teach people, the first thing you can say if you don't know what to say to your kid is, have your smartphone in your hand and say, I can't imagine what it's like for you to grow up with this. I probably would have destroyed myself if I had this. That's not what they're used to hearing from mom and dad. You get along shoulder to shoulder instead of across the table, just like Michelle said, and now they're gonna feel that. They're gonna know it's a conversation and not a condemnation. We change that, now we start to build on that with little conversations. I mean, we talk to kids, our kids at the dinner table was, hey, best and worst. What was y'all's best and worst today? Open-ended questions to get them talking, and within that, they start to find their footing with trust and what they're going to share with you.
Well, and one thing I found too when talking to teenagers is that we're trying to help them navigate this, right? But then you have parents that aren't maybe necessarily setting the best example because they have their phones at the table or they're taking, inappropriate pictures and sending
Parents
them.
need to look at one thing. If they're not loading Robux cards, because those kids go through Robux money, dollars so fast. If they're still doing Robux 2 or 3 days down the line, you only bought a $20 card. You need to look at that. That's a warning sign.
That's the warning sign.
That's it.
There's so much to cover with this topic of human trafficking. I do want to pivot for just a second because I want to talk, Heather, again. Not every survivor looks like you. So can you explain why we call people survivors and who all is at risk? It is not just white women.
No. So survivors is anyone who's made it out the other side.
Boys and girls.
Boys and girls.
And
absolutely, yeah.
And others, yes.
Absolutely. And so as a survivor, just for me, I look like this, but my story was very different. But being in Kathy's program, being in Kathy's class on Wednesdays, that even 5 years out of prison, I still show up to because I still need support. I still want to be able to help other people. And meeting these individuals that come into her class, I'm like, wow, there's so many of us. There's so many that are still in the life that are trying to get out and don't know how, but then there's so many that have made it to the other side that are survivors. I'm not just a survivor, I'm an overcomer because I didn't just survive that, I overcame that. And that's what I want people to understand is that we don't have to be what happened to us. There is help, there is individuals out there that want to love on you, want to help you get to the best version of yourself so that we can help other individuals, even the children. I hear, and it breaks my heart to hear these little kids, but I think about my son who's now 19 when he was a child and he's in this Call of Duty stuff but he's speaking to individuals. They're in these little chats and speaking to individuals and it's like they're starting so young, but it has to do with conversations that parents are having. You have to have that uncomfortable conversation because when I tried to tell my mom and as an adult that it was going on, it's not something that she wanted to talk about because it's uncomfortable. But if you're not having the uncomfortable conversation, then how do your children even know what's really going on? Even as teenagers.
Right.
If you're not talking to me about this is what this looks like or hey, what's going on with you, you just kind of let me go off, then I don't know that what's happening is a bad thing. And then it continues to happen and continues to happen. And thank God for me that he plucked me up and put me in prison. Because it saved my life and allowed me an opportunity to go out and be a lesson. Absolutely.
And I know another part, perhaps the darkest chapter of this conversation is also very uncomfortable. We don't want to instill fear in people, we want to educate, but people don't know what happens to these people who are trafficked. What is their life like? What are we dealing with here? What are they being asked to do?
At this point in life, anything you could not even imagine or think of to what you can think of. Anything that seems so absurd when you have individuals out there that call themselves kinkologists. And
what does that even mean?
That means they deal with things that are darkest, forbidden sexual pleasures, and they counsel individuals on how deep and how dark to go and how humiliating other people and getting pleasure from seeing other people's pain is okay, to people actually falling victim to something that looked like they were going to get cotton candy and ended up getting poison. It goes from one extreme to the other, and the scary part about this is there are so many people that are implanted in the midst of what we do that you don't know until you know that somebody is in my prison program, maybe, that got in the program, that they're still being controlled on the phone, because now, when I was in prison, you might get a phone call once every 90 days if you had good behavior and you could afford to pay for it. Now everybody has iPads and they talk on the phone all day long to people, and they oh my God, so some people are being controlled while in prison to recruit others. When you get out, you
stop.
Well, so that's the thing.
Bars.
So even as the women, and I've seen this because I have a son who's incarcerated right now, and so seeing what's going on in some of these websites that I'm on Facebook and these groups, these men are having these women send pictures in, but they're putting them in collages so that they can hide the exploiting themselves, right? So that TDC doesn't catch them, and then cash apps being sent from one person to another, and then it's somehow making it onto their books, and so. Even from an incarcerated setting, these women, or even men, are being exploited and being trafficked, and they have no clue that that's even what's going on.
And we call it commissary prostituting, because that's how they're able to shop at the store in prison. So they're being commissary pimped and commissary prostituting. It's crazy.
So with our kids, what we're seeing too are, especially with AI right now, so with inappropriate pictures, right? It could be something they sent. It could have been an innocent picture that somebody manipulated and made into an inappropriate picture. And we also have like generative AI. But then there's this picture or video, let's say. So then it gets used against them, right? Because they will threaten them to either post it online, send it to your parents, to expose them.
Sextortion.
So it's called sextortion, but we also have financial extortion, because they'll do it for two reasons, right? One will be like, hey, pay me money, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Or it's like, send me more pictures, more videos, or it will turn into something physical. Right. So then kids are scared or embarrassed, and this is why we talked earlier about having that trusted adult that you can talk to, because it just gets worse. And I've never seen a case of sextortion to where they actually didn't go through with whatever they were gonna, what they promised. And
it's a big problem.
Yes.
Yeah, it
especially. Is. So for the next 30 minutes, we want to pivot the conversation into solutions and how we can help people. So let's start there. Something we've covered in the news recently is that someone was being trafficked at Bush Airport. We know that the airports are a hot spot to catch people, but also where men and women being trafficked are going through. I've seen a lot of these advertisements in stalls in restrooms, even on airplanes, where if you're being trafficked or if you see someone you think is being trafficked, call this number for help. Is that a solution? Has that been working?
It's noticeable, and I was on the front end because I've been an airline ambassador that was on the beginning end of that campaign about us traveling the world and getting that done, and Polaris Group, but what is important that people need to understand, to retract that individual victim out of human trafficking, once you get them out, it takes practice to unlearn things that have been programmed in you. And a lot of people say, oh, you're rescued now, you're safe. No, not necessarily. It could take years to undo what has been done. Like Heather was saying, I still come back after 5 years. I've got people that have been coming back for over 20 years because every day individuals who were victimized it's just like AANACA, all of the A's and all of that. You have to practice, and you start from zero every day you wake up, because you cannot unlearn or unsee
it's trauma.
Yeah, but you don't have to hurt as bad anymore. But You have to
It's
practice.
a practice.
It's a practice.
Okay. And that's specifically
And that's what
your
I do.
organization
That's
does.
what I do.
Can you talk briefly about how you help survivors?
Each individual experiences trauma in their own identifiable way. No two people feel pain exactly alike. So what didn't bother you might totally freak the next person out. And there's not a cookie cutter wellness treatment plan to blanket across individuals, because everybody experienced their own thing. And a lot of things they have taught themselves to lie to themselves. This really didn't happen. So once or if they were forced to be drugged or drugged, it takes time for the brain to even readjust to not having these drugs and chemicals in your system. So some things that you thought might have been true might have not been true. Some things that you covered up and lied, they will uncover, and it takes time to understand how to fall into acceptance of where you are in that part of your recovery, and you got to be dedicated to it. The rehabilitation part is interesting because organizations, a lot of them they depend on funding to fund each client, and that never has happened with me, because it's just for so long there was no money at all, and I don't get paid per head. And it's just a blanketed. Anybody that wants help can come to Harris County Constable Precinct 1 to our class on Wednesdays. Don't cost you a dime, and you can come as long as you want to, for however long. You can take off 2 or 3 year comeback if I'm still alive. If not, Heather and them will be there, because I'm old.
And Heather is a success story.
Yes, she is.
And Michelle, can you talk about your organization and how you help as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So talking to parents, so we have a program as well, keeping kids safe in the digital age. We also work with school staff, keeping students safe in the digital age, kind of giving them those tools and having somewhat of a conversation like we're having right now, what to look for and how to set them up. We work with middle and high school students. We have a program titled the Youth Leadership Academy, and it's about 6 to 7 sessions, and what we do is we're trying to instill leadership skills in them and really try to combat like those vulnerabilities that we know make people more susceptible to trafficking. So we talk about peer pressure, we talk about character development, we talk about like even civil engagement. So we're not just drilling trafficking for 5-6 sessions, like we're talking about relationships, and again, like how, so we combat it through leadership. So then we also work on the demand disruption side. So we have a piece of technology. So we have the most sophisticated platform on the planet right now that's fighting trafficking online. So what this is it's gifted to law enforcement and to any NGOs that are working to fight demand. And basically you're putting an ad, like a dummy ad, on these sites where we know that individuals are being bought and sold, including our children. And so then our buyers or even traffickers go on. So once they reach out to that phone number, then using AI, because we're leveraging AI for good, and then those conversations will start going. And what we're doing is we're building the largest database on buyers that is out there. So law enforcement can use it for stings, and it's a force multiplier, because you don't have to have one person behind a computer, right, like keeping these conversations going. We can identify whether they're sex offenders using white pages. We have all their information. And the official launch is like this month, but it's been out there for a couple of months, and we've already disrupted over 17,000 transactions and identified over 13,000 individual buyers, because we have repeats. Because people ask me, like, wait, those two numbers don't match. Well, because we have repeat buyers. And because we are using AI, we can tell whether it's a trafficker or a buyer because of the language, because some of them are going on there, like Joe was saying, to try to recruit, right? Like they will recruit anywhere they can. So any conversation they're having with our platform is a conversation they're not having with a child.
And Joe, can you talk a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, certainly. Demand disruption, actually the roots of our organization that I founded, Demand Disruption, were founded from a former sex buyer. a man who had a 30-year sex addiction, overcame that, and from that started to get help, started to see a healing and restoration. It was like, I can't be the only one who's going through this. And of course, he isn't, and he wasn't. And so having that buyer insight, buyer informed perspective, we've developed ways to intercede. So you ask about a solution. If you look at the stage, I'm just going to take the 4 of us sitting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm here too. 5 of us sitting here. Community. KHOU brings community awareness and understanding through a format like this. We need community. We need to listen in order to survivor leaders. Survivor leaders with lived experience who can say specifically about not just what they experienced. The horror stories sometimes are necessary. When we work with survivors, we tell them, tell it or don't tell it. I want to hear what you think we should do for next steps to lead the change that has to happen in our society. And so coming down further then to demand. Demand is the most direct way to fight human trafficking. We believe the work we do is the most direct way, and I say that because if I'm at the point of arrest, we work with law enforcement, and the guy's arrested thinking he's going into a brothel or a illicit massage business, or he's going into a hotel room and he's going to buy sex, and instead it's a police operation. Well, we're invited into those operations. The reason we're there is as these men are in handcuffs, we want to begin a connection with them. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but they're the monsters. Like, why would we want to talk to them at all? The reason is because that man in that place, we call them outlets, whether it's a hotel or a brothel or whatever, he is there at the end of a series of contributing factors and things in his life, from pornography, from hypersexualized culture, strip clubs, whatever.
Even
and then
molestation.
at some point it gets to where, well, what's the difference? She's getting money and I'm getting sex. Why is this even illegal? And the justification all along the way happens. I was able to participate in a doctorate thesis with Dr. Kevin Wilkinson Jr., and what we studied was men's mindsets. We actually had one of the larger cross sections of surveys of men that were convicted of buying sex, and took the survey, put it into the study. And what we learned was, as much as when I started this, the last person I thought I would work with, because I left my career after 25 years in strategic sales and capital project management, because I just was burdened for this work, and I volunteered. The last person I thought I'd work with was a buyer, because in my mind they were the monster, they were the predator in the van.
Not
they were
fixable.
They were, all I know is you're the enemy. And so if I get you in my crosshairs, you're the enemy and I'm gonna treat you as such. The fact of the matter is, when we look at a cross section of buyers, we were on a recent operation, and of all the men that came in there, 70% were married, about the same percentage were churchgoers, had jobs. Many of them were on the job because they got arrested during the day. It would be very convenient to say it's this monster, but unfortunately it's not. It's our brothers, it's our people who are at the end of a broken process where they've got an internal struggle and they're acting out in a way that is never going to fulfill it, but it's fueling an industry they usually don't have any idea about.
Let me ask you this though, if you're saying it's your brother, it's your dad, it's your whoever, that's scary in and of itself.
Sure.
But is there a commonality that you've seen with these buyers who've been busted?
Absolutely. So the discussion about pornography oftentimes goes directly to a morality argument. And to be honest with you, illicit sex and commercial sex, they want that argument. Because it's easy to say, oh, you're just judging me based on your morals. You're just wagging your finger. This is not a morality argument. This is a health argument. The commonality that we see, so if I'm in an illicit massage business or modern day brothel, or I'm in a hotel room, 90% of those guys, conservative estimate based on our studies, ended up there because they were on a porn site. And just like that flow I mentioned earlier, I created something called the escalation dynamic. And it starts with softcore pornography, hardcore. Hardcore, webcam, strip club. Everything so far is legal. Everything so far is private. Nobody's business but my own. I get that and I support that. But that escalation then becomes, well, how far can I take this? I had a buyer in my class that said exactly that. He said, now that I know this is connected to trafficking, and here I am feeding that addiction and the situation for them, I think his exact words were, I'm looking back on the greed. Well, this is nice, this is attention I'm getting. Well, wonder if I could take it a step further, almost verbatim, and I hear that regularly. So to answer your question, there is a feeder system that sends people to these. Now, that does not absolve them of their responsibility. The first thing you have to be is accountable when you work with us. We do not work with buyers who abuse children. All of the people that we work with are people who have bought sex from adults. That doesn't make it better. It just gives us an opportunity to absolutely go directly toward what led you there. And when we understand that, we created a timeline. On that timeline, we developed programs as pattern interrupts. Because if you change a buyer's heart, keep them from ever buying again, that's not one incident of victimization. We've got buyers that have bought 200 times. You stop a buyer, it's an average of 8 victimizations per person.
Wow, it's really eye-opening as someone who's learning this on the fly as I'm talking with you. You've really peeled the layers back.
Go deep.
And really gotten to the ground and the root of the problem. Sex addiction in and of itself, not illegal, but when you start escalating, that's where you get into that territory where you start getting...
And it's to say nothing, just to follow that point, sorry. A few years ago, the mayor's office on human trafficking added human trafficking and domestic violence. And I applauded that because we're talking about illegality, we're talking about buying sex. But on that timeline, from first exposure to pornography to right on up the line, teen dating is influenced by the aggressive, violent things they see in pornography. And again, not a morality issue. It changes the brain. There's a conditioning that happens. And at some young age, when you have no point of reference and you see pornography and it's violent, graphic, nothing to do with intimacy, your mind tells you as a little boy, I guess this is what it is to be a man in a relationship.
That's right.
And as a little girl, I guess this is what's expected of me in a relationship. We absolutely deconstruct that in our workshops because we have to get to a fundamental level where that's why we talk to our kids about your body is important. Your body is your body and you should have ownership of. When they're young, have an age-appropriate conversation. Because if they see that, they're going to inherently think, I shouldn't have seen that, I can't tell anybody. And now they're trapped to try to figure that out with their amygdala, right? The part of their childhood brain, they can't process logic. And now they're in a relationship and they're acting out. We're back to that acting out behavior, back to that health language. They're acting out violence, choking, whatever, in a sexual relationship with somebody and they're 15, 16 years old.
But she likes it.
And she has to think that she
in
does
the videos,
to
and
be
they think without asking because
That's
that
what everybody
face-to-face
does.
contact is going away as we have more screens in front of us and they don't ask the woman or the man,
That's right.
do you like this? Is this what you want? They think that's what you want and it escalates into big problems.
so
It's important also for y'all, for them.
Yeah.
And oh my God, what they do is so important to the domestic violence organizations need to understand that this is all, I mean, like siblings. I used to say first cousins, but it's closer than that because what he just said and what she does connects into why these individuals are thinking it's okay to be have this domestic violence, even verbally, physically, all of that. So what they do and that research, I mean, what we do over here, you know, is important. But that's if people would start listening to what they do, then that would be how to curve it, then I wouldn't have to work so hard on rehabilitating it. Because what they do is the most important.
It's incredible to see how all of you work together and work towards these solutions. So I know this is overwhelming and new information for a lot of people who are watching. So I want to go one by one and talk about the takeaways from this conversation. So Heather, for survivors who are listening to this right now and are still feeling the incredibly raw emotion of being abused, what do you have to say to them?
So I would tell you that you are not what's happened to you. You are worth more. There are people who have been exactly where you've been that are here, and you just have to reach out when you see that person, and it can be scary as someone who's trying to escape that, to wonder if you can really get saved, if somebody can really rescue you and keep you safe, but I promise you it's possible. And so just take that step, make that phone call, flag that person down. And if I come in contact with you, I will do everything in my power to help you.
All right, and Kathy, Heather was in your program. What do you have to say for others who would like to enter?
You don't have to be afraid. Whatever it is that you don't want God or the devil to know, we can discuss it. And it's going to take practice. It doesn't cost you a dime. Just 2 or 3 hours of your time once a week at 1302 Preston Street on the 2nd floor. Helping Others Excel class. And of course, those are the acronyms for HOE, which we turn the negatives into the positive.
Come on.
Ownership.
And it's okay, it doesn't matter if you're spiritual, if you're not, it doesn't matter. It's about healing, understanding that you're going to be practicing this recovery for the rest of your life. Stop putting a date. Well, in 30 days, my child's going to be okay. 60 days. We start over every day, but there's help. And we might not be for everybody's trauma, but there's so many other organizations that can help with their recovery journeys. So it's important that we all work together and understand each other's lane. There's so much to be done, so much to be uncovered, and so much to be healed. And I'm just grateful you got the right group on here today.
Yes.
Because if we didn't have on this end what they do, this would almost be impossible. That's why it took so long. I've been doing this, we're going into the 23rd year. And everybody was calling me the Harriet Tubman.
Well,
and that's okay. But with watching individuals like them come up and with what they do, now it's helping people understand I can heal. It's okay. I don't have to be ashamed of my past. I can use my past to strengthen my future. And that's why now we're seeing much more success on this end than we were. Why are they coming back? Why do they keep falling?
Use your past to strengthen your future. I love that. And don't compare your story with other survivors as well. Joe, what about from your point of view as far as what you want people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, this was a lot. If you're hearing it for the first time, you're hearing more than just awareness, though. And I credit this format, because this is the conversation we have to have. The work that we do to stop demand, we believe is the most direct way to fight human trafficking.
It is.
Now, we don't start doing that until we seek counsel of our survivor friends, Kathy, Heather, the Rhonda Kirkendall, the Rachel Fishers, the survivors who have gone and become overcomers and leading. If we listen to survivors, they'll help us with the blueprint to understand how do we make sure that we're as proactive as we can. Now, as far as demand goes, and I'll just say this directly to the camera, if you're struggling with an unwanted sexual behavior, whether it's pornography, whether it's sex buying, whatever it is, reach out to us. Demand Disruption. You can email us at defender@demanddisruption.org. That will be discreet, and we'll go through a process we call the bridge, and that's exactly what it is. There's an equation that I came up with a few years ago to try to explain to some men I was working with. Because our goal is to get you back to your beliefs and values, what truly is there, not what has escalated in your life through your acting out behavior. And when we do that, the equation is this: your identity plus your purpose will equal your legacy. And we are all going to have a legacy, whether we mean to or not, negative or positive. We're all going to have an identity, whether we mean to or not, positive or negative. But when we realize our values and we're able to get into a process that connects us with lifelong resources like support, like professional therapy, because much of this is directly related to trauma itself for buyers and people who are acting out. When we can do that, we replace the failover that's negative into something that creates a safe process. And that process keeps people from buying again. It feels hopeless sometimes for people. I talk to men who say, I'm never going to get out from under this. And 4 months later, they say things like, I never thought I'd have integrity again. We can do that. And we can do that because when there's a buy-in and there's no free ride, you better get ready to get to work. But once you do, we've seen that proven hundreds of times over and over again that we can change that. And you change a buyer's heart, you change them from ever buying again. This should not be a career. We shouldn't be here still.
We
better not be here in 10 years. And if we are, something went wrong. We need to stop this, and we can stop it systematically. Last thing I'll say is I had somebody an interview last week, and they said, do you ever get discouraged because we're not winning? And I said, we win every day. We win every day when we shut up for a minute and listen, not so it's our turn to talk, but so it's our turn to learn from people who've been there, and then take that and apply it to the work we do. And we win every day when a guy stops buying, because that's multiple victimization. We win when we're in front of a group of parents who don't know what to do, and they're thinking, what filter is going to fix this? What can I put on the phone? When we tell them it's not that, it's you. You're in that child's life, and you're going to be the game changer, and help them work through that, we win then. And we've got to remember This is winnable. A lot of today was big and heavy. No, we can win this. In fact, we are winning.
And for people who are hearing about this for the first time, I love hearing that buyers are becoming part of the solution. You know, there is a chance to change.
Yes.
Michelle, final thoughts from you, and specifically about the AI, because this is something that's really been important, especially in the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, to buyers out there or perpetrators, we're pulling that veil of anonymity, right? The internet is no longer a safe place for them to hide. And you know, for parents, just starting those conversations and calling one of us, right? Like most of our organizations have programs. Find out if the schools have programs. Any type of gathering that you have, your faith-based communities. Start those conversations, but with your kids, more importantly, start early. I know we talked about pornography, and one thing I wanted to mention about that is that kids aren't necessarily looking for it. They're getting exposed to it earlier and earlier. They can just be playing a game or on YouTube, and it's just there. So if we're not having those conversations with our kids, they're gonna learn it from somebody else. And being that safe place for them, if you are gonna review and go through what's on their phone, pick your battles. You know, look, they cuss, they say inappropriate stuff, right? We did
and
too.
they twerk.
Right, that too.
Then there's that.
I'm not ready
It's a
for
whole
that.
other conversation, Kathy.
But just know that they're doing that, and because if you're going to get after them for all the little things, then you're not going to be that safe person for them. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but even consent, what does that look like? And you don't have to make it weird. You know, just making sure somebody's comfortable, but having those conversations about what consent looks like. And as they get older, it's not about taking things away. It's about starting conversations. So if they're watching a movie or a show and we do see that violence, we do see that like teen dating violence or just anything, use it as a springboard to talk about, you know, why is this healthy, why is it not? And we talk about pornography quite a bit, but you know, even romance novels give us a very unhealthy sense of what relationships are going to be like. So I feel like we romanticize a lot of times the things that we see. So if we're not having those conversations, and then, you know, just being that good example for really anybody in your life. And we tell kids, right, like they're role models too for anybody that's around them. So just starting those conversations, and for anyone who is victimized, knowing it's not your fault. We all make mistakes. You may have done something that maybe you're not proud of, or something that you knew you weren't supposed to do. But if somebody is now using any of that to take advantage of you, please know it is not your fault, and you're not alone, right?
Very
you have a
good
whole
advice.
army of people that are here to help.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
This is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. We have a lot of events that are going on, all of us. So if you're not sure what to do at this point, go online, go to some of our social media pages, right? See what's out there. We have an event on the last day of Human Trafficking Awareness Month. We call it our Love, Disrupt, Defend brunch. And the whole purpose of that is to bring the community in to have a contextual understanding of the work that's being done. And this year the theme is legacy. And the legacy is all that we own. That's the one thing in your life. People think my legacy is what is mine. No, that's the one thing in your life that's not yours. You do the work, and you leave a legacy for other people. And everyone up here are doing this. So I'm honored to be here, and thank you all for having this forum.
Putting a positive
I'm
spin
honored
on a
to do
heavy
it.
topic. Kathy, Heather, Michelle, and Joe, thank you so much for being with us. And before we go, if you or someone you know is being trafficked, we have resources from the National Human Trafficking Hotline on your screen right now. We'll also have the information for the organizations our panelists are with on KHOU.com. For now, thank you all for joining me for this important conversation. Again, thank you for being here. I'm
Thank you
Stephanie
for having
Simmons.
us.
Thank you for watching KHOU 11+.